Lloyd Vance's Insider Football is back on 1029 The Game, the Coastal Sports Network. So glad everybody could be with us this evening. Back after a little hiatus. I was on vacation. Back, though, after the 4th. How you doing, Kevin? Kevin
I'm
Midgette here with us this evening.
I'm hanging in. I'm counting down to Labor Day. Things slow up a bit for me after Labor Day.
Yeah, it's funny, Kevin, because both of us are in the northeast section of the country. We're just about how hot it is. It's like hot and muggy, and the next thing you know, a thunderstorm rolls in, and it's just like you're running for cover. It's just crazy with the weather, and with the weather being like this, I'm like, all right, well, training camp is going to be interesting for some of these teams. Uh, the countdown is on in terms of NFL action. The LA Chargers report to camp. Their rookies do on Saturday this week, July 12th. And then their veterans come in on the 16th. And then their opponents for the Hall of Fame game, the Lions, they have their rookies on the 16th and the veterans on the 19th. So, you know, finally, we'll get some real action. And the Hall of Fame game, not that anybody cares, will be July 31st in Canton, Ohio. As I said, Chargers and Lions, and that'll be the first action, they'll put on the pads. But every team has 90 players in training camp, and you're going to be seeing a lot of guys that are going to be doing other things after a certain period of time. But, do you look forward to the Hall of Fame game? Not care. I mean, would you even put some shekels on it? Let's go there.
Well, that's a different question altogether, Lloyd. Uh, Shekels, yes. Caring, it's almost a benchmark, though. Because once you see that game is being played, it's usually on a TV in the background. You're not really watching, but you see some football being played. It lets you know it's on its way. It's like, all right, here we go. We got to get this game out of the way so we can get the good stuff coming up.
Yeah, and it also signals players are back kind of with their teams. The teams are kind of all right in control of them, and unfortunately, this time of year, it's always organizations, coaches are all holding their breath, hoping guys don't get in trouble. I was thinking about that on 4th of July. With the fireworks, everybody remembers Jason Pierre-Paul when he was on the Giants. He was a big time player, and he unfortunately hurt himself with fireworks. Dallas, though, had a different type of situation. Cavante Turpin, their all pro kick returner, he got popped for marijuana possession and an unlawful weapon this a couple days ago. So, you know, should teams be holding their breath? And what do you think is going to happen with Turpin? You think he's going to get suspended? I know marijuana is not what it used to be in the National Football League.
Well, from what I read, he also the firearm was in there and the excessive speed he was going. I mean, he's going to get something, but I mean, Cowboy's got a cowboy. You think Jerry, a part of Jerry's just like, yeah, yeah, it's old school for him. So, I mean, he'll get a little slap, but he'll be all right.
Yeah, and we saw that with Rasheed Rice last year. It kind of took a while for everything to kind of play out, and you know how the agents do and the attorneys, they'll kind of extend it out, and we'll probably be talking about a suspension in like November or something.
Yeah.
But for now, he'll probably go to camp. They'll tell him to keep his mouth shut. In terms of camp, Kevin, it's an interesting dynamic, and I want to talk to you about this. Teams now are training at their own facilities. Everybody's built these gorgeous complex, like the Eagles have the NovaCare complex, right near Lincoln Financial Field, and everybody trains at their own facility. Only I counted them up. There's only four teams going to a university to train like the old days. Buffalo, Kansas City, the Rams, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Then you do have the Dallas Cowboys go to Oxnard. They have the whole thing they put on there away from their Dallas star. But talk a little bit about that change in philosophy and as a fan, do you miss it? I still remember the days of going to Westchester University, and then when I was covering the Eagles, driving up to Lehigh, and that was like a big day. So, what do you think in terms of that?
My friends and I spent many a day over at Westchester University during training camp. It was awesome. I mean, just especially when like we were in high school and you got to see these guys up close. We didn't have social media back then. There wasn't the interaction that you have today. So to actually see these guys, and sometimes you got to talk to some of them. The one time I still bring up is I got to carry Eric Allen's shoulder pads as he was doing an
Oh,
interview. So like while he's doing an interview, he's like, "Here, carry these, walk with me." I'm like, "Okay," It was just like that's cool. So it's like younger guys today don't understand how important that was, to be able to see these guys on that kind of level. And I get it now though why they don't do it like that. It's big money. They have the money to spend on these things, and it's part of the recruiting process for free agents. Also, the facilities they have there, the amenities. So I mean, it's just one of those foregone things now that it's never going to be like that again.
Yeah, and I think a big thing, Kevin, is the cost. I talked with a guy with the Eagles when I was covering a team, and I was like, how much does it cost to do all this and move these guys? They're basically moving their exercise equipment, the whole NovaCare facility up to Lehigh back in the day. And, the players and getting accommodations, feeding them and transportation, all that was factoring. And it was a large sum of money. So the teams are they're more budget concerned, and you're right, they are saving money by staying in their own complex, but these places are palaces, and as you said, they have their own cafeteria, they have their own chefs, they have everything right there. So really doesn't make that much sense to go to another place. Probably not. Now Andy Reid was the coach then, and I asked him, I said, why do you take the team to Lehigh? And he said camaraderie. It's a way of building a team, bringing everybody together. They're away from their families, and everybody's single-minded, focused. So he still does that with the Chiefs. Do you think that's a smart way to go, or do you think, all right, facilities are what they are, and everybody can kind of do their thing right there?
I think Andy's just old school. I think that's what he does. That's what he likes. These guys today, they're just. It's not as much camaraderie if you're on your phone or your tablet the whole time either. They didn't have that back then. So, you actually had to talk and get to know people and all. I mean, one of my favorite movies of all time, Remember the Titans. All right, find out three things about this person. You find out three things about that person. I don't think those guys are doing that today.
Yeah, they're not. And I still see when the players are together, it's still kind of offense, defense. There's some back and forth, but for the most part, guys kind of stick with their positional group, and they're leaving the facility. Once they leave, they're not hanging out together, and it's not all buddy buddy like you used to see in like a North Dallas 40 where the whole team was partying together and all that back in the day. So we'll see how it goes. The Eagles do report to training camp. Uh, Everybody on July 22nd. So again, that'll be at NovaCare, and then we'll see from there how the preseason plays out. There's going to be injuries, and want to talk about defections here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9, the Game Coast Sports Network. A player that left the Eagles, and he's a world champion. Bryce Huff had something to say, in terms of out the door. He couldn't keep his mouth shut. I guess it was how great he played, but he said he knew way back when he first reported the Eagles in training camp that it wasn't going to work for him, and it wasn't the right situation. He's now back at San Francisco with Robert Salah, who he played so well with for the Jets, 10 and a half sacks in 2023. But, is this much ado about nothing? Should Bryce Huff keep his mouth shut? What's going on there?
I get it when people are out the door and it's like, all right, I'm going to tell you what I really think about you now and how poorly you're running this organization and you didn't utilize me. That team won a Super Bowl. There are some times where you just got to like bite your tongue and like, all right, this didn't work out. You don't sit there and blast the team for you not becoming your full potential of you that just won a Super Bowl. You got a ring out of that, believe it or not. So it's like, how about you just say thank you for the ring and go about your way?
Right. And it was truly a ride along situation because it was Josh Sweat, it was Brandon Graham, it was Carter on the line. I could go on with that defense. The defense was number one across the board, and they figured out, to their credit, they figured out early that Bryce Huff was not the guy they needed, and they didn't put him out there and play him because we know in the past the Eagles and Howie Roseman have done that with a guy like Marcus Smith, who they drafted number one overall, and they were like, "Oh, we got to dress this guy. We got to make sure he gets on the field." And the guy couldn't play, and so they decided early, and it seems to be a new approach by the Philadelphia Eagles. Guys like Huff, they say, "All right, can't use them, let them go," and that's the philosophy because you can't. These roster spots are just so valuable. It's going to be 53 players, and they need everybody to contribute. They send Huff over to the Niners. As I said, they'll we'll see what kind of compensation they get back. It's all contingent on playing time, etc. I think it could go up to like a fourth rounder next season. So, um, not bad, not a bad breakup, but just a breakup. And obviously, the Eagles like, all right, see ya. Don't let the door hit you.
Right.
I still have not heard about the ring ceremony. Maybe they'll mail his to him. They probably won't invite him. Speaking of former Eagles, and this is a big story around the league, and it's something we talked about earlier during the draft. And I was just at a family function this weekend, and immediately it was like, "What's going on with Shador Sanders?" You know what I mean? So I'm hearing out of Cleveland, Kenny Pickett and Gabriel are the two leading candidates for the starting job there. So Flacco and Shador Sanders are kind of lower on the depth chart going into camp. What do you think about Cleveland? I think, in terms of they're just a mess. You know what I mean? I don't think they have a plan. So are they really going to go with Kenny two gloves?
I think it's one of those situations where they're going to try to win some games early, and say they get out to like 1-3, 1-4, then they're going to have to put the name in there, the name that the fans want. It doesn't even matter if he's the better player. The fans want to see the name, the jerseys that they're buying. They're buying Sanders jerseys out there. They're not buying Kenny Two Gloves jerseys. So you got to give the fans what they want to appease them also. So they're going to try to win a couple games early. Once it fails on them, which I'm sure it will, you're going to see Shador Sanders out there.
Yeah, and Cleveland was a 4-win team last season, and Kevin Stefanski, their head coach, and Andrew Barry, their general manager, they cannot be feeling safe with Jimmy Haslam in terms of their job security. I think a big factor is going to be the reps, obviously, in camp, the practices they have with other teams, and then they have their preseason schedule August 8th. They're at Carolina. The 16th of August, they host the Eagles, and then they'll finish on the 23rd with the Rams. So we'll see how the reps go. Um, they should take care of it in camp. They should figure out who it is. But if you're putting Pickett out there, I mean, they really don't think they're going to win. I mean, they just don't have many weapons. They have Jerry Judy and they bring over Deontay Johnson, who kind of bounced around the last couple of years. But Cleveland just seems to be a mess. And I just think they're going to blow this thing up. And you may see another head coach in there, and we'll just go from there now. And also in terms of the Browns, I wanted to get your take on this. Deshaun Watson came out and said, "Oh, he's going to mentor Shador Sanders, and all he needs to do is say, okay, this is my resume. Don't do what I did. You know what I mean? Don't get hurt. Don't get in all the off-field mess." So, what do you think about Deshaun Watson and his $46 million guaranteed contract this season, mentoring Shador Sanders?
I think Shador Sanders should get a bracelet that says WWDD. What would Deshaun do? Do the opposite of it. It's like, just look at your wrist, think about it. It's like, what would Deshaun do? It's like, all right, I'm going to do the opposite of that. I mean, Deshaun Watson, he's trying to make it sound good out there. I'm going to help this guy. Help yourself. You've done nothing to help yourself, let alone you think you can bestow some of this wisdom. But, I mean, if he can try to help out as much as he can, maybe he's learned some things, but he's a cautionary tale at this point.
Yeah, he totally is, and it just seems so far removed from his glory days at Clemson, and he comes in as a rookie and plays very well, and he becomes a Pro Bowl quarterback. I think he led the league in passing the one year, and everybody forgot all about that once all these horror allegations came out, and you know we'll see how that plays out. In terms of those allegations, though, the NFL handed down a suspension that was similar to Deshaun Watson. Justin Tucker, Ravens kicker, is suspended for 10 games. Now, we kind of talked about it when he first got in trouble, but, you know, talk about the suspension and do we think he's going to, somebody will latch on? Will somebody be crazy enough once their quarterback starts their kicker starts shanking kicks and extra points to give him a look?
I tell you what, he serves his time, and you get to a point, say you're in like the last couple weeks of the season, and you have kicking problems and issues. Yeah, you're going to bring him in. It's like, if anything, to see if he can be just automatic from 40 yards and in. I mean, you see these times when kickers can't make extra points. So it's like, if you get somebody who can just hit from 40 yards and in and worry about the longer stuff down the road, yeah, they'll give him a look. There's no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, and we saw last season Brandon McManus, who kind of got into some hot water when he was on the Jacksonville Jaguars, and he was, I don't think he was suspended, but he was kind of on the sidelines after he was signed by Washington, and Washington stepped away from him. The allegations went away, and then late in the season, as you were kind of alluding to, the Green Bay Packers needed a kicker. Their kicker was not doing well, and McManus went in there and performed very well for them at the end of the season. So we'll see if Tucker's going to be that guy. Tucker's 35. The Ravens have brought in rookie Tyler Loop. He's a 6th-round pick out of Arizona. They're going to go with him. But the thing is with Tucker, he was only 73% in terms of field goals last year, 22 of 30, and extra points only 60 of 62. He was just Mr. Automatic for so long in the Hall of Fame, and everybody just said he was just automatic, to be next kicker with Morton Anderson and Jan Stenerud. I'm going to go out on a limb and say no one's going to sign him. I just think these these allegations, as we keep hearing this stuff, it's just like, oh man, does somebody really want that headache? And I still remember even Michael Vick, who went to jail, the PR nightmare that was in terms of the Eagles for a little bit when they first signed him, until he went out and kind of proved it on the field that he could play. A lot of people were upset, talk radio, message boards, etc. So I think any team that signs Tucker, they better be ready to feel the heat. In terms of talking about heat, Kevin, I wanted to get your take on this here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Thanks for joining us. Coaches on the hot seat. Now, I was looking at Pro Football Talk, and they kind of came out with their list, and we'll kind of go through these candidates, and you can, chime in on them, and then we'll say, okay, maybe there's some other guys that are on the hot seat. They put Dave Canales for the Carolina Panthers on the list right away. He was 4-13 in his first season. Obviously, he has David Tepper, who's the owner there. Who's he's always meddling. So, do you think Canales should be on a hot seat? I thought the Carolina Panthers actually got a little better as the season went along, and we're going to talk about the whole NFC South in a few minutes. But what do you think about Canales?
I think it's hard when you have a rookie quarterback to expect somebody to win right away. And the fact that he actually showed the stones, for lack of a better term, of benching Bryce Young and playing Dalton until the accident, the injury. And it was like, and then Young came back. He was a different quarterback then. He was making better decisions. He was moving the ball. The thing that's the problem with Carolina is their defense is so tragically bad. You're going to have to hang 30 points to win a game. So if they can't turn that around, yeah, he's not going to hang too long.
Yeah, and they they inexplicably traded Burns away, and yeah, they got some return from the Giants, but they needed him on that defense. That defense, as you said, not a lot of teeth. You can't even really name any playmakers on that defense, and we'll see how that goes with Carolina. I tend to think, even though Tepper has fired, he fired Frank Reich in the middle of his first season, so it
Mhm.
could happen. I think Canales is maybe safe this season. This was an interesting name at number 4, Brian Schottenheimer for the Dallas Cowboys, and I think that the reason he's on here is nobody else wanted him. He was on no one's radar. Jerry Jones being Jerry Jones, he hires him and gives him the job. I think because he feels like he can kind of control him and control the narrative and everything. But if there's a better option out there, let's just say Belichick decides to leave North Carolina, come back to the NFL, he's definitely trying to trade up. So I think that's a reason Schottenheimer has less job security.
Schottenheimer is there until the next prettiest girl comes by. And it's like one of those, Jerry's done looking at him, moves over, oh, okay, I like you even better. So if I'm Schottenheimer, yeah, I realize I have to win now, right away. I'm not going to get a lot of time here.
And he's got a lot of work to do. He's got Dak Prescott making the most money in the National Football League, $62 million, and CeeDee Lamb got paid. The offensive lines are work in progress. They're bringing over Williams at the running back position. Defensively, they have some names, but they've always had a lot of injuries for the Dallas Cowboys. And the biggest question mark out there, Micah Parsons. Are they going to sign him? And if they don't, I mean, that's going to be a soap opera the whole offseason.
You would think they would lock him up, but we've talked about before. Where's Micah Parsons' head at? Does he want to be in Dallas? He says he wants to be in Dallas. Does he want to be just a podcast guy? Does he want to go to Philadelphia? It's just like I think Micah Parsons does a very good job of marketing Micah Parsons, but where he truly wants to be, who knows?
Yeah, and the NFL in season this year, they're going to cover the NFC East. So I know that's one of the stories that'll probably be on their Hard Knocks version of that, and we'll be watching for that. Number three, coach on the hot seat, Shane Steichen, Indianapolis Colts. I talked about this one before in terms of him. He has not lived up to expectations in terms of coming from the Eagles and that 2017 team. And, he was going to be this genius that got this offense going. Obviously, drafting Richardson, it was kind of a reach, and it hasn't really worked out there. Steichen 17-17, no playoffs, and unfortunately, Jim Irsay, as we were talking about before, passed away. Daughter Carly Irsay Gordon has now taken over, and she's very hands-on. So I know she's going to be looking at Steichen and GM Chris Ballard. So what should Steichen be thinking here?
The problem with Steichen is it's a quarterback driven league. You drafted a quarterback very high. That quarterback is not living up to expectations. So if the quarterback doesn't work out, guess what? You're not going to work out either. You're kind of, attached at the hip. So he'll go as far as Richardson takes him, and I don't think it's going to be that far.
Yeah, I think unfortunately this is going to be one of the changes that we talk about in the final weeks of the season. I just think that Carly Ursay Gordon is evaluating, and Sykin just has not worked out. And then it's probably going to be Daniel Jones. What's he bringing to the table? Daniel Jones, we saw him at the end of his career with the Giants, and he wasn't doing much there. Obviously, he had a cup of coffee with the Vikings where he was the backup, but. I just think they're a mess, and it all revolves around that reach for Richardson and a defense that's just not stopping anybody. So um, I definitely agree with Steichen being on the hot seat. Number two, Brian Daboll, another. This is a layup one. I mean, the New York Giants. Everybody's like, okay, Mara still has an egg on his face from uh, the NFL film show where he said, "Oh, Saquon goes to the Eagles, I'm gonna cry," etc. And then Saquon goes wins the Super Bowl for the Eagles, has a season for the ages. Now Dable and another team, what they went 3-4 games last year for the Giants. They just couldn't get out of their own way. Really have not made a lot of changes in terms of offseason. Yeah, okay, Russell Wilson, Winston, and Dart are the quarterback, but other than that, there's not a lot there. They should have a good D line because they bring over Abdul Carter in the draft. But is Carter going to be able to save Brian Daboll's job?
I'm shocked they brought him back, to be honest. At a certain point, you just got to cut ties, and it's like, all right, let's start this over again. The quarterback's different, even though you brought in an older quarterback at this point. You have now a couple of younger players on the offensive side. Defense might not be that bad, but that defense isn't going to be enough to carry him, that's for sure. So I think, once again, like you said, it's a layup. He'll get this year. If I'm guessing off the top of my head, the Giants, just 6.5, I'd set it at the over-under, and they're probably right in there.
Yeah. I think we looked their team win total, and I think it was 5.5.
Yeah.
May have jumped 6.5, but yeah, I said definitely take the under. This is one of the worst teams in the NFL going into the season, along with I believe the Saints, and I think they're going to be in an Arch Manning sweepstakes if you know Peyton's nephew comes out of Texas and into the draft. So Dayball, I agree with the last one. This is an interesting one because he was considered a genius. The team did very well. They made the playoffs, and everybody was like, okay, Mike McDaniel for the Miami Dolphins. And Stephen Ross, the owner there, he's getting a little older. He's like Jerry Jones. He's like 85 years old, and I know he would like to see um, more success there. And there's been questions: is this team soft when it gets cold out, particularly when their player Jordan Brooks said, we kind of shut down when it gets cold outside. And obviously, there's a whole to it thing. He only played 11 games, the concussion issue. So Mike McDaniel, they have a ton of talent on the offensive side of the ball, including you know, HN at the running back position, Tariq Hill. Is he going to be able to save his job in Miami?
He is the one guy out of the five that we mentioned that would get hired again, I think. If he gets fired and thrown out the door, someone will, because he's young enough and it used like the boy genius moniker and all that, someone will give him another opportunity. Now with Miami right now, like you said, they have some offensive weapons. Where's Tyreek Hill at though? Health wise, where's he at in his desire to want to play still? Because he seems a little checked out at times with off the field stuff and everything else. And I mean, with their division, they can't get past Buffalo is all it is. And if they can't get past Buffalo for that division, there's not much they can do. You have the Jets still starting to improve, and New England now with a new young quarterback. So you throw in New England getting better, Jets could be a little better. They can't get past Buffalo. Yeah, he could be out.
Yeah, and that's gonna be interesting to see with him if he can weather the storm there. But as you said, he's considered as genius and everything. Advanced play caller with Shanahan and McVay background, but it's just something to miss with the Dolphins, and they have a tough schedule. They have the Bills in their division, and I'm just not sure about two if he's going to last season. And you have Zach Wilson as the backup, so we'll see about that. I
Also,
wanted to
one other thing, Lloyd. Sorry to interrupt. One other
Yeah,
thing.
go ahead.
Let's not be remiss to mention the trade that just went down with the Steelers. So you
Yeah.
sit there, you put Smith over there, you get Ramsey over there, you bring Fitzpatrick back. Was it Darren Waller back?
Yeah, they bring Waller out of
Mhm.
retirement as well. From he comes over. He was in the Giants. So it's like, what does he have left? And it's just a hodgepodge roster. It has a lot of names. The offensive line's in flux because their tackle retired, and it's just like, okay, what are they going to do? And I just think it's when I looked at their schedule, I was like, yeah, I think they faced 8 to 9 teams that were in the playoffs, and I just don't think they're going to be able to turn the corner. And another season not in the playoffs. Ross is kind of antsy. We'll see if he brings back Chris Greer, the general manager there as well. I think that's a prime candidate. So, you know, I wanted to throw a couple other names at you. Mike Tomlin. Now, they just gave Omar Khan, the general manager, an extension in Pittsburgh. Um, it's not the Steelers' way to get rid of their coach. I don't even know how many they've had, like 5 or 6 in the last 30 years or something like that, or more. What do you think about Tomlin?
Tomlin's there until Tomlin wants to leave, I think. And once again, it's always like the running joke almost. It's like he'll finish above 500. Ever since he went to 17 games, now he has to finish. It's harder to finish over 500. He finishes over 500 with Aaron Rodgers. He should get a lifetime contract because that's how impressive that will be to finish over 500 with that guy as your starting quarterback.
And the thing is, Kevin, the over under that's been set by Vegas is 8.5. So I was just talking about this at a family party. I think this may be the first season where he does not get over 500. This roster, when you look at it, in terms of the TJ Watt situation, is he going to hold out or is he going to pay him? The offensive line has always just been patchwork over the last couple of years, kind of since Pouncey. There's great center retired, and their left tackle, they invested a draft pick in Broderick Jones. He hasn't played up to snuff. Um, do you think this will be Tomlin's first losing season?
Yes, yes, it has to happen. And the whole thing is, if it's going to happen, this is the team to do it. This is the one right here for Aaron Rodgers to come in there. And the thing that kills me is they at one point had DK Metcalf and Pickens on the team as your wide receivers, and you had no quarterback. And I just don't know what their thought process going into the offseason was. And now you have the trade they made, you have the TJ Watt situation, and it looks like they had no plan going in the offseason. Then all of a sudden they're like, oh, we better start doing something. And they're too far behind, I think, at this point.
Yeah, they waited on Aaron Rodgers. They let him, string him along, and I'll say luckily for Pittsburgh, he came in, but he's a 41 going on 42-year-old quarterback. We saw how he finished up with the Jets. And the thing is, we talked about camaraderie earlier. He does not endear himself to his teammates. He's kind of, away from them. He's kind of, they say he's a free thinker or whatever, but he's just not a guy that's a team player. He doesn't want to. Um, he always said, "I'm not going to mentor a young quarterback," and all that, all that kind of talk. And he's going to show up in Pittsburgh one off season, and he's going to get everybody together. he barely made it to the last mini camp. So I think that's a huge factor in the Steelers and their success. Yes, they brought in Caleb Jones at the running back position from Iowa. He's going to team well with Warren. We talked about Jonnu Smith coming over, and they'll team him with Fryermuth to have a 1-2 punch at the tight end position. But who's going to help Metcalf out? With Roman Wilson, he's been there. He's kind of an average receiver, and there's not really much else there. So interesting thing to watch there in Pittsburgh. And Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season. Every time you hear it. So we'll see if it happens. And you and I both kind of predict it will. We're here on Lloyd Vance's Insider Football on 109.9 The Game, the Coast Sports Network. Thank you for joining us. Um, we talked about Steichen earlier. How about Gannon with the Arizona Cardinals? I think he should be on a hot seat. Another underachieving team. Another situation where, okay, the quarterback's been a little dinged up and they haven't played up to expectations. But Jonathan Gannon, his calling card was defense when he came from the Philadelphia Eagles. That defense has not gotten it done. Obviously, they've made some changes. They brought in Sweat, who was a Super Bowl hero for the Eagles. We'll see what he's able to do. But other than Buda Baker, their safety, that defense has had no teeth.
Well, that's the problem right there. You have a defense with no teeth, and you have an offense with a quarterback that is, in my opinion, I know Nate would disagree, is vastly overrated. He's paid and he's treated in conversations like he's a one of the top tier, like top at least 15 quarterbacks, top 10 quarterbacks, and I don't think he is. I think he's short. I think his arm sometimes he believes in it too much, and I don't think they can win with Kyler Murray as their quarterback.
And Murray's been there what 6, 7 years. His legs are not what they used to be, and he's got to get done with his arm. And they're another team. Their offensive line has been in flux for as long as I can remember. They just can't get it right. Drafted a lot of players. Again, this year they drafted a first rounder, and we'll see if they're able to pull it together. But definitely, I think Jonathan Gannon on the hot seat, and the Bidwell family who owns that team. They're definitely got their eye on. Okay, should we make a change there? They brought in new GM Osen Fort a couple years ago as well. Um, we talked about Shador Stander's situation earlier with Cleveland Browns. Stefanski, I mean, that's another layup one for the Cleveland Browns. Should he be on the hot seat?
Oh, most definitely. I mean, anytime you take the job for the Cleveland Browns, you're not bringing all your personals into the office. You don't have to take them all back home. It's like, you win a game, maybe you sneak another, knick-knack in or something like that. That's a tough gig, man. That's a tough one to hold on to. And at the end of the day, if you don't win games, you're not going to have that job much longer, and they don't win games.
Yeah, and their team, they can't get out of their own way, whether it's the head coach pick or there's a Sean Watson guarantee contract that everybody's kicking them in the butt over, or we all remember the quarterback you know nameplate list with Brady Quinn and Spurgeon Wynn and all it done with. So it's just like, all right, this team is they're just snakes. I mean, the Browns will always be Browns. It was almost like it was crazy and lighting it a mile a couple years ago. Joe Flacco something in there, and the guys they made the playoffs. They were winning all those games. I think a lot of it had to do with Chubb, who played well at the running back position until he hurt his knee. And then they have Miles Garrett, obviously a game record, one of the best in the NFL, but just not a lot there for the Browns. And Stefanski and Andrew Barrett, their general manager, they should not be feeling too comfortable. Last one I'll throw at the hot seat. And the reason I put this guy on is his team's just been underachieving. Another place where they spent a lot of money and the owner kind of gets involved. So Raheem Moore, Atlanta Falcons. Should he be on a hot seat?
Nah, I think he'll get a pass this year. With starting Penix Jr. at quarterback right now, I think we'll get a little leeway with that because they do have offensive weapons though, and they're going to be okay this year. They're going to do some things maybe. I don't know if they, we'll get into the NFC South a little later here, but at the same time, I think with a rookie quarterback playing a true rookie quarterback, playing starting game one as your quarterback, I think he gets a year to play with on that.
Yeah, I tend to think that Fontenot, the general manager there, and Arthur Blank, the owner, will give Raheem Moore another opportunity. Somebody had thrown that to me, and I was like, all right, let me get Kevin's take on this. Uh, 7 new head coaches, though, in the National Football League this season. You have New Orleans, Kellen Moore, Dallas, Schottenheimer, we talked about. Las Vegas Raiders are going with Pete Carroll. You have Aaron Glenn with the Jets. Chicago, they have Ben Johnson, Liam Cohen in Jacksonville, and then New England brings back Mike Vrabel. So you see, with 7 new coaches, every year something's going to change. So, you know, some of these guys have got to be on the hot seat. So that's a good topic to talk about here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 Game Coast Sports Network. So glad everybody could be with us. Kevin and I are going around the league news and notes. As I said earlier, this Saturday we will have players in training camp. The Chargers will have their rookies report on July 12th. So we're getting closer to some action. It's September 4th, be here before we know it. That's when the Eagles and the Dallas Cowboys kick it off in the season opener. Kevin, wanted to get your take on this in terms of every season since 1990. So that's 34 years. There's been at least 4 new teams to jump up and make the playoffs and or more. So last year you had Cleveland, Dallas, San Francisco, Miami. They missed after making it the year before, and then the newbies were Washington, Minnesota Vikings, Chargers, Denver. So they were the new ones. What so looking at non-playoff teams. So let if the trend holds, there at least be 4 new teams. So do you want to name them, or you want me to throw some of the ones that I thought out there? You want to throw one team out there?
I'll throw one out. I think Atlanta. I think Atlanta makes the playoffs. That's the one where it's like because the first place schedule, of course, is going to go to Tampa, and I just think Atlanta has enough there, and it's all going to be on the maturation process rather of Penix. But at the same time, I think they can get into sneak in.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick because they've really been working on that defense in terms of they have Jesse Bates, and we'll go over the rest of the roster soon. But they definitely with Penix Jr. they seem to have that consistency at quarterback. The young guys seem to like him. Unfortunately, for Kirk Cousins, hey, he's made over $300 million in his career, one playoff win. So no one's crying for him. Now this season, he's going to be the highest paid backup in the National Football League. Um, or if there's an injury or something, maybe they'll trade him. But it's looking like Cousins is going to be with Atlanta. I think that is a good pick to kind of jump from the pack, make the playoffs. I was looking at the New England Patriots. I just think Mike Vrabel's coming in there. You had Rod Mayo, who was a players coach, and I heard he's playing cards with the players on the team when you know Bob Kraft's in the front row and he's in the back playing cards, hanging out with the players and not really doing the job. Fired after one season. Usually that truly shows okay, no control of the squad. So Mayo out, Vrabel comes in. He was with the Titans, I think, 12 to 15 years, something like that. He coached that team a long time. They had some success there. Even got to an AFC championship game with Ryan Tannehill, a quarterback. So he's bringing in that discipline style. I think the defense will be better. They brought in a bunch of free agents as well. And Drake May is playing at a high level, and he's a dual threat kind of guy, so he can move around. He can do some things. The thing is with the Patriots, and I want to kind of get your take on them, is Stephon Diggs. They brought him over to be the number one guy, and then we saw this whole mess with the boat and all of that stuff. Is he going to? And he didn't have a 1,000-yard season last season for the first time in forever. Is he going to make a difference? So, what do you think about the Patriots?
I think Stefan Diggs and Cardi B are having problems right now because Cardi B just removed Stefan from all her Instagram
Oh
account, all the
boy,
pictures. So with that going on, where's Stefan's head going to be? This is the make or break year for Stefan Diggs because he went to the Texans and what happened, and now he's with New England. It gets to a point. It's like after all right, you get one season, you get 2 seasons, you get different teams. It's like you see the writing on the wall. So if they can get some out of Stephon Diggs, they might be all right. But he's the linchpin for that team.
yeah, they need him and they have a lot of names in terms of receivers. They have a ton of receivers, but no true number one. And they need somebody. We've been saying this forever. They need somebody to step up and be that guy. They seem to have their quarterback with Drake May. But I think with their late schedule that they may be able to sneak into that number 7 spot. Obviously, 7 teams come out of the conference, and they're going to have a good chance. Now, another team I think could jump up that was non-playoff and get back in the mix this season. And this is the other day I was on Rich Q's show, and he said this is a no-brainer. But the Cincinnati Bengals, I think if they don't start 0-3 like they did in 2019 and you know last year in 2024, they're going to have a good shot. And Joe Burrow just put up ridiculous numbers in terms of leading the NFL in yards, touchdown passes last season, and they've won 9 games, so they just missed last season. What do you think in terms of the Bengals?
The Bengals have always been their own worst enemy. They just can't get out of the gate. I mean, if they can get out of the gate 2-2, they would be so far ahead of the curve from how they usually end up. I think it's going to be interesting to see how they're going to be at running back. It's like you have Chase Brown as their lead running back this year, and I mean, I'm sure the work carries in for other guys, and there's always the health too of T. Higgins and his situation going on continuously. Their contracts, it seems. Jamar Chase now with the contract that he got the bag. So it's like, is he still bring the same energy? And Joe Burrow, it seems to always be there's that health question mark. It's like if they can start out well and hang together, there's no doubt they should easily be in the playoffs.
Yeah, and Zach Taylor, I think he's kind of on a hot seat there. We know Mike Brown, the owner, he's cheap. He doesn't want to pay a coach, so usually when his coach is under contract, he's probably not going to fire him. But Taylor's got a little heat on him, and in terms of the Bengals, Hendrickson, he wants that contract. He just saw Max Crosby with the Raiders get a contract that's paying annually $35.5 million a season. Hendrickson led the NFL in sacks last year, 17.5. Seem to be a stalemate here. Who's going to blink first?
Well, the problem is that Hendrickson needs to realize Max Crosby has nobody like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow on his team. They've allotted their money to go to him. So it's once again, it's like people want to be treated fairly with respect, though. It's like I don't even think you need Hendrickson. You would be like break the bank for me, but what he's getting paid right now is he outperforming it? Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think eventually they cannot let him hold out all season. And then in terms of players and holdouts or hold-ins, whatever you want to call it, you know, the teams have the hammer. I've always said this. So, you go back to Le'Veon Bell with the Steelers. He decided to sit out that whole season. He was never the same. The Steelers said, go take a walk. And then his career went downhill. He went to the Jets, got a little bit of money, but he just was never the same player. So, Hendrickson's a slippery slope. I know he wants to get paid, but he's under contract for one more year. And they can fine him. The fines for a veteran not being in a training camp are extremely high. I think it's up to like $50,000 per day, and that adds up quick. So we'll see how that works out in the next coming weeks as teams report to training camp. Uh, Chicago Bears, could they be a team that jumps forward? I was talking with Nate about this. They bring in Joe Tooney. They try to fix this offensive line. Um, Defense, they're trying to fix it. They did bring in Sweat the year before from a trade from Washington. Do you think Chicago could be that surprise team, or you're not believing what they got? A new coach in there, Ben Johnson. Can he fix your buddy Caleb Williams?
I think they got a shot, to be honest. It's one of those, I think, because once that division's loaded, as we all know, I think the Bears can pass Minnesota, and it depends. It's like the Packers. I think the lines fall off a little bit from losing your coordinator, expecting another year out of golf like that. We talked about the lines with the retirement of your center and all the other things. They have a lot of transition they're going through. The Bears could be that fringe team that could sneak into a wild card if all things break well for them.
Yeah, and the Eberflus, we knew he was one of those coaches we talked about last year on a hot seat, and could he get it done? And Ryan Poles is their general manager. He's on the hot seat now, and it's win now. So they said, okay, the offensive line was the problem. 68 sacks allowed. Um, Need to fix this thing. So, uh, and I'll throw one last team out at you. The San Francisco 49ers. Could they turn it around? Everybody. Shanahan has got this label of a guru. He led the team to the Super Bowl. They didn't win. But they have everybody, few guys coming, key guys coming back. Obviously, Brock Purdy, they gave him the bag, and Christian McCaffrey. He's getting up in age. What does he have left? Brandon Ayuk coming off a knee injury. He's there as well. No Debo Samuel, but good strong nucleus from the passes there, including George Kittle. Can the Niners get back to the playoffs?
I don't think so. I think they have a lot of older guys that are getting paid a lot of money. And I think they're in a situation, first of all, they had to pay Brock Purdy. If you didn't pay Brock Purdy, you'd have to start over again, draft somebody, and you have too much money tied up in older players. So at least with Brock Purdy, you're giving yourself a chance. I just think they're another year older. And I think it's just it's a steady decline for the Niners.
Yeah, everybody just expects them to kind of be in the mix, but I think a big thing is in the AFC West, all those teams just beat up on each other. It seemed like all their division records were like 3-3,
Mhm.
where they could win here and lose on the road. But you know, we'll see how it goes. But there were a couple teams that I thought could jump forward. Any other ones that you think could be that surprise team around the National Football League?
Not off the top of my head, to be honest. I think we pretty much hit the ones. There's one in there. Don't get me wrong. There's one that we did not mention that we're gonna be like, "Are you serious?" But do I know what it is right now? Nah.
Yeah, and like I was saying a couple of years ago, who would have thought the Browns with Joe Flacco would get it done? So we'll see. There's always that surprise, and it's like, oh, okay, they're a story till they're not a story when they lose in a wild card round. So yeah, but there'll probably be four new teams, and because that trend has been pretty strong around the National Football League. A couple of years ago, I think it was as high as 18 new teams in the playoffs, but I don't see that happening because the NFL is just so top heavy in terms of the best coaches, the best quarterbacks are on all the same teams, and you expect them to be in the mix. Buffalo, Kansas City, the Eagles, those type of teams. So we'll see. Here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029, the Game Coast Sports Network. Thanks for being with us this evening. We touched on this briefly. I wanted to just get your take. Who won the trade for Pittsburgh and the Miami Dolphins? Kind of a head scratcher, as you were alluding to earlier, Kevin. So Miami gets Minka Fitzpatrick back, who they drafted from the Steelers. They get a 2027 fifth round pick. Pittsburgh is tight end John New Smith, who had his career year last year, and Arthur Smith knows him well. He had 88 catches last year for 884 yards, 8 TDs. With the Titans, they were just, the Dolphins, they seem to be throwing it to him over and over again. They also get Jalen Ramsey, who was unhappy in Miami. He's a little older, so they get that plus a seventh pick in 2027. I'll let you chime in first. Who do you think won that trade, and do you think it's going to make a big deal for either team?
I think Pittsburgh won the trade, to be honest. And I think one of the things that stands out to me is the fact that they got Ramsey in there, sure, Fitzpatrick. You get a defensive guy for a defensive guy, get that. But the key was getting Smith. Because if you can run two tight end sets now with Fryermuth, you have Aaron Rodgers, whose arm is not as strong as it used to be. So you sit there and you have a more intermediate passes inside, 10 yards, 10, like 8 to 12-yard routes. You have two guys out there. I think they did that to enhance Aaron Rodgers.
Yeah, I think Rodgers going to feed him the football, and he got a lot of those short passes, those quick outs with the Dolphins last year because Tua's not have that great arm strength. And Aaron Rodgers at this stage in his career, he's probably going to look for those intermediate routes. He's trying to get the ball out of his hand very quickly. They're obviously going to want to go play action and bring in Johnson, the first, the young running back, and having Jalen Warren there. But I think two tight ends is big for them. I definitely thought the Steelers did well in this trade, because Smith, he is a little older. I think he's in this around 32 or so. But they still may get a couple seasons out of him. You pair him with Fryer Muth. We talked about DK Metcalf earlier. I think the big thing, though, is Jalen Ramsey. They can add him to Darius Slay, to bring it over to the Eagles.
Mhm.
And then they have Joey Porter Jr. And as long as they get the TJ Watt situation sorted out, Watt and Highsmith up front and Hayward, they can get a lot of heat on the quarterback. So you'll see some turnovers. The only thing is, I can't wait to see if Mike Tomlin's going to work well with Jalen Ramsey, who's known to kind of be, he can be a loose cannon, you know what I mean? So is that going to work out between the two of them, or are we going to see a sideline dust up?
Oh, there's gonna be a sideline dust up because Tomlin, he doesn't take kindly to that stuff either, and he's not afraid to show his facial expressions or voice his opinion. So that's one of those get your popcorn ready. It's coming.
Yeah, it is. And if they have the season kind of we expect,
Mhm.
the number's 8.5, and I think they may come in around 8. So it's probably going to be that inconsistent ups and down. And you have Aaron Rodgers, who's been known to have blow up at players on the sidelines, and then you have DK Metcalf, who can be a little volatile as well, coming over from the Steelers, and then you add Jalen Ramsey in the mix. This is going to be like as the world turns in Pittsburgh. It's going to be fun to watch. So unless you're a Steelers fan. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. I'm here with Kevin Midgette, our buddy Angel behind the glass. NFL top 10. I mean, top 100. Are you into this? Every year they come out with it, and the players vote. And before we start talking about where it's kind of shaping out, you know, does it matter? It's almost like I hear a lot of times players, and the younger guys especially, they get right on Twitter like, "How in the bleep am I number 77? I'm better than this guy, etc." It's almost like they're Madden readings. Does this really matter?
Absolutely not. It's a time filler. It's a space filler to create discussion about football until the games actually start. Is it fun to pay attention to? Sometimes, sure, but I don't take any merit with it though.
Yeah, I kind of agree. And at 100, you got Lad McConkey, um, Chargers young receiver. He did have 82 catches last year, 7 touchdowns. So coming in year two, uh, is he worthy of top 100? Where do you see him in terms of all the receivers out there?
Not to bring fantasy into it, Lloyd, but I can't help myself sometimes.
There you go, buddy.
Lad McConkey's going somewhere I saw around like the third round, fourth round, and that's a high draft pick. So I mean, obviously the people that run the fantasy numbers, they think he's going to improve on his rookie season. So someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I definitely like Lad McConkey. I think that Herbert's going to feed him the football a lot, and um, the Chargers could be another one of those teams where the coach not on the hot seat, but they could take a step back. I could see last year they kind of, the hardball way took very quickly, and they were able to jump right in the playoff mix. But they're in a tough division. We talk about Denver in terms of how they're shaping up, and um, I just think Bo Nix has come along at the quarterback position. You have Sean Payton, who's Super Bowl winning head coach, and their defense is under Vance Joseph. They're attacking, so it's going to be tough for the Chargers getting back in terms of having the Chiefs and having Denver in that division. So, Lad McConkey at 100, Leonard Williams, Seattle at 99. Veteran defensive tackle. Anything on him?
No, I just think it's one of those things when they make these lists also, they like to spray positions in. It's like, all right, we got to throw a couple defensive tackles in here. All right, don't forget we got to get some linebackers in here, safety. Where are we at on tight ends? Yeah, throw a tight end in there. So I just think it's like a smattering of positions. So like people don't think that you're just leaning one side.
Yeah, and I also think they like, okay, get the old Pro Bowl list. Let's see who made the last couple of years. All right, throw him in there, not throw him in there. I'll just kind of jump around. Drake London is at 97 for the Falcons. To me, he's been kind of underachiever coming out of USC. Everybody thought he was going to be, the superstar receiver. Yeah, he did have 100 catches last year and 9 touchdowns. But what do you think about Drake London? Is it time for him to kind of come along? I know we're going to break down the Falcons' whole roster in a minute, but what do you think about Drake London?
Yeah, he took that big step last season that you were waiting for the year before. So maybe it took him a little longer. He's a year behind on where he should be, but last year was a step in the right direction. And he's the lead guy there. You got your rookie quarterback, and it's you. It's basically it's his time right now. If he doesn't take that step this year, then it's a regression.
Yeah, and they've teamed him with Bijan Robinson. They have that triplets that, famously the Cowboys did in the 90s. That's what teams are trying to do. So I think we'll see how that turns out for them. Uh, 95. This is an interesting one because we talk about the Eagles and guys getting paid after they get it done. Josh Sweat is the 95th best player in the NFL according to the top 100 list. He only had 41 tackles last year and 8 sacks. So I think a big byproduct was of the Eagles' success. They put him on his list, but now he's got the bag. Is he going to be, a top 100 guy for the Cardinals?
Absolutely not. How many times have you seen these guys get picked off these Super Bowl teams and they get their contract and then they never achieve that level again? And like you said, I mean, he's going to have to do more for the Cardinals than he did for the Eagles. And I just don't see him doing it.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you there, and I thought that was kind of surprising there. Uh, I'll get a couple more, and then we'll get ready for our NFC South preview. 91, and this was interesting because Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback for the Dolphins, he only played in 11 games. You know what I mean? So he's 91 on the list, and to me, he's not a top 10 quarterback. So Tua at 91. Do you think that's a big thing? He did have 19 touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 11 games.
No, he's not a top 10 quarterback. I agree with you right there. I think it's, once again, think about these lists, though. You have to make sure all these markets are kind of represented. So it's like,
That's
all
a good
right, we
point.
got to get to the southeast area. All right, Miami. Yeah, Miami. Throw somebody else in there. Yeah. Just my thoughts.
That's great. And the last one we'll talk about is at 90. And I was talking with Nate about this guy earlier, and I was like, oh, wow. It came out the last couple of days. Denver defensive lineman Zach Allen. And we talked about the Broncos, how they're ascending. And when I look at his numbers, I mean, Allen is coming along. He's a guy that's a game record. He led the NFL with 67 pressures last year, most for defensive tackles. He had 15 tackles for loss and 8.5 sacks. So Zach Allen is a guy we should keep our eye on.
Yeah, that one I agree with right there. You're right. He's a game changer out there. He's going to sit there. He's going to put pressure up the middle, and he's going to free up other guys. That one I think they got right.
Yep. Here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 1029 The Game, Coast Sports Network. Training camp battles. Kevin, want to look at a couple of these as we're entering camp next couple weeks. We talked already about the Cleveland quarterback situation, so we won't beat that to death. We'll see how that turns out. Uh, I had predicted earlier that it was going to be Sanders starting, but I just don't think it's going to happen. So, and as crazy it sounds, Stefanski's enamored with Pickett, which I don't. What is he seeing there? He obviously wants his pink slip, but at Detroit Lions corners. This is an interesting one because they were ranked 30th against the pass last year in the NFL. They allowed 20 points per game. Their safeties are very good with Kirby Joseph and Brian Branch, who had 13 picks between the two of them. But they did lose Carlton Davis. They have a new defense coordinator, Kelvin Shipper, so they're trying to fix this cornerback group. So Terrion Arnold's former first round pick, he's in the mix. Ennis Rackstraw, Gavin Holmes. They bring in DJ Reed from over with the Jets. Rockish Sin's there coming over from the Niners. And then from the Eagles, Avante Maddox. So how is this going to play out in terms of the Detroit corners?
I think they're going to have to score a lot of points. I think they're going to have to really sit there and hang some numbers. Because what I'm hearing on paper right now, I mean, Arnold last year, one of his bigger problems, he got the guy got penalties. He just made some
Yeah,
dumb plays sometimes.
led the NFL in PIs. Yep.
Yeah, and it's just like hopefully he can learn from that. Other than that, like I said, you're going to just have to keep putting up points, and can Goff do that for another season? Because I don't think anybody outside of the Detroit area has really bought into Goff all the way. Are you a little impressed? It's like, really? Jared Goff's doing that? Because we all wrote him off for dead when the trade happened and he went to Detroit. It's like, that's the last we'll see of him. So for him to do it another season, I'd be impressed. But yeah, I think they got to hang some numbers. And if they can do that, then they're going to be just fine. They're going to have to still, like we talked about before, revamp the offense a little bit. Because when you lose your offensive coordinator like that, like they did with Ben Johnson, you have to sit there and get a new scheme going. Is Laporta going to get the ball more and everything else? Jameson Williams still going to get the ball. So, yeah, they got some work to do out there.
Yeah, the Lions definitely do. I don't. Campbell's one of those. He's not on hot seat, but can he maintain that success? That's the big question. They scored a ton of points. They were right up there with the Buffalo Bills in terms of the most points scored in the National Football League. But golf just played so bad in the playoff games, and you're like, all right. And then Montgomery's coming off that knee injury. We'll see. But that definitely that Detroit cornerbacks group. I'm looking at them. I'm gonna be looking at the Green Bay receivers. They have a ton of guys. In terms of fantasy, you always take a Green Bay receiver, and then you're like, oh, I played the wrong guy this week. They spread the ball around too much. Romeo Dobbs is too inconsistent with his drops, and then you have Christian Watson with coming off the knee injury. So that's a group I'll watch. But um, the one I wanted to get your take on, and we kind of hit on this before, being in the Eagles area, Eagles wide receiver three, Jahan Dotson, Johnny Wilson, Terrence Marshall, Aeneas Smith, who's kind of come back from injury, and then Elijah Cooks is one of those guys they always kind of talk up in these mini camps. Is any of these guys going to jump forward for the Eagles receiver group?
In a short answer, no, not at all. Dotson's the best of the mix right there, and you still don't have much. It's always been an ongoing thing with the Eagles wide receivers to get that third wide receiver, and it's still work in progress as we speak at the moment.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. Maybe they get somebody during cut down day or something, but yeah, right now they just have probably one of the best tandems in the league. But then after them, you just don't have much. And they did bring Goddard back in terms of the tight end position, so they'll have him in a mix. Saquon catching the ball out of the backfield, but that receiver three is kind of deficient. So
It kind of,
Dotson,
you know what it
yeah,
reminds me of, Lloyd? Back in the day when the Eagles would bring in the old Hall of Famers before they got to the Hall of Fame, like, oh, let's bring in James Lofton, Art Monk, let's bring him in, like Carlos Carson back in the day from the Chiefs.
yeah.
Like these guys are the superstar receivers, and you get them when they're old and washed. I'd rather take one of the old washed guys right now than have Dotson back there as my third wide receiver.
Yeah, or you just yeah, and I'll throw Julio in there a couple years ago
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And thing is, or just take a flyer on a practice squad kid, because that third receiver, sometimes he's got to be a kick returner or he's got to be the gunner on special teams. You're going to need a guy that can do a variety of things. But, I just don't know if Dotson, the guy that Washington obviously gave up on him and they put him out there for the Eagles. He did have a big catch in the Super Bowl. Everybody always says that to me. But, you got to do more in the 17 game season. So something that Eagles fans are going to be looking at. Last thing I'll get your take on before we jump over to the NFC South preview. The Denver Broncos signed J.K. Dobbins coming over to the Chargers. He's 26 years old. Obviously, we know he has the knee problems from his days with the Ravens. So it's a 1 year deal. Last year, kind of a rebirth for him. He had 905 rushing yards for the Chargers. He did average 4.6 per carry and 9 TDs. Is is that going to be something to watch with Denver? Denver has a pretty loaded backfield as well. Rookie RJ Harvey's coming over. He's a third round pick. They have Audric Eston. Um, but they did have Devontae Williams go to the Cowboys. So talk about Dobbins and what's going to do to Denver's running back position.
I think it strengthened it. There's no doubt about it. And I got to see Dobbins a lot when he was with the Raiders. And you're right, he did have a nice season last year. But it couldn't hurt having a guy like that there. Do I think he's going to last the whole season? No. But at the same time, he can help with some of the younger backs that you have because Harvey is a rookie. And, he can bring some stability to that position while they figure it out.
Yeah, and they're going to throw him in the mix there. And Sean Payton, I think, likes having a variety of running backs. And that way you can kind of split carries around. And as an old school coach, you know him. Once he finds his guy, he's going to feature him. So maybe it could be Dobbins. That offensive line did play a little better last year with Mike McGlinchey first and foremost, but we'll see how the rest of that line does in the season. But yeah, that's going to be an interesting room to watch in training camp. So we're here on Lloyd Vance Inside of Football on 102.9 Game Coast Sports Network. Thanks for joining us. Going to jump over to our NFC South preview. Looking, everybody always says, this division, it's one of the also rans in the National Football League. We know there's 8 divisions, but it always seems like, all right, somebody's got to win it. They got to go to the playoffs. But I'll start with the Tampa Bay Bucks. They've won this division 3 straight years. They just gave Todd Bowles, their head coach, who always seems to be on a hot seat, they gave him an extension. Mal Glazer and his family own the team. Jason Light, the general manager there. They did make the playoffs last year, but they were kind of surprised by Jaden Daniels and Washington Commanders losing 23-20 in the wild card round. What are you thinking of Tampa Bay? And then I'll kind of go over the roster.
The one thing I will say about the Buccaneers is they are the least hyped continual division winner I've ever seen. Nobody talks about they just win that division every year, and even talked about, and I had to double check today. Baker Mayfield threw 41 touchdowns last year.
Yes.
Baker Mayfield. Nobody talked about it at all. And it's just like they get no press down there. And I did actually like the receiver they drafted as well. And I like the running back situation. So I wouldn't see why Tampa Bay would not win that division again.
Yeah, and then you and I will get into the fantasy football quarterback ratings probably next week. But I was looking, Mayfield was rated sixth, and he did throw for 4,240 yards last year, 31 touchdowns. He did have 14 interceptions, but man, I mean, what a rebirth for him in Tampa. And you talk about this group, you know, offensively, they put up 502 points. So they are averaging 29 and a half points per game. The defense did let up about 22.6. So that's where, Bowles, that's supposed to be his calling card, and that defense was kind of uh, having some issues. So they did make some changes back there. But if you look at their roster, Mike Evans, he's tied right now with Jerry Rice for the most consecutive 1,000 yard season. He did get it on like the last snap, I think, of the season.
Mm-hmm.
1,000 yards. Is he? Which is that? Is he going to get season, Kevin? I think he blipped
Oh,
out
yeah,
for a
it
minute.
broke up a little on me there. If he can stay healthy, he will. I mean, Godwin the same way. It's like health's been an issue for him lately, and that's why it was important, for McMillan to step up and other guys. 'Cause even Kate Otten had a bigger role for him last year for a certain period of time, and they went to that two-headed running back that they have there. But if he can stay healthy, he'll definitely get it.
Yeah. So, and then they have Godwin, as you said, coming back from that leg injury. Hopefully, he'll be able to come back from that. You have Emeka Ibuka coming over from Ohio State. I really like that pick. He's first rounder. Tristan Wirfs, obviously, an offensive line, again, going to anchor this group. We talked about the rebirth of Baker Mayfield. Bucky Irving in the backfield, he was a surprise guy. And Rashad White, he's kind of a guy that's catching the ball. And then they have Sean Tucker, who's big at the goal line. So they seem to have their mix on the offensive side of the football. And you talked about K. Dot and tight end, kind of underrated guy. You pick him up when your quarterback's injured and he kind of catches a touchdown for you in fantasy. So
Mhm.
he's in the mix. Defensively, they have Vita Vea in the middle. He's like a rock. But they need, they're bringing over Hassan Reddick. He's got to get some heat on a quarterback for them. Secondary, it's always kind of been their calling card. They have Antoine Winfield there in the secondary. He's played pretty well for a number of years, strong safety. And then Levante David, he had another great year for them, the veteran guy. So anything else in terms of Tampa? I'll give you the over/under total for them is 9.5. So do they get that?
I I say they get 9. I say they just miss it. But once again, someone's got to take the division title from them, and I don't know if there's anybody in that mix that's going to be able to do it.
Yeah. So they're week 1 at Atlanta, then at Houston, and then from there, they do have a few tough games here and there, and they play 5 playoff teams, so I would expect them to repeat in this division. We're here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football, coming down the stretch talking about the AFC South. Atlanta Falcons, we touched on them earlier. Raheem Moore is there. Last year, 8-9, no playoffs. Terry Fontenot's the GM. Um, the receivers, Darnell Mooney was sneaky. He was another one of those guys. You pick him up in fantasy, had a couple big weeks. Drake London, we talked about him. sometimes it gets some big days, and other times he's just blocking. Offensive line with Jake Matthews, he's now a veteran there. He's been there since 2014, and then the rest of the guys around him got to get better. Tight end Kyle Pitts, one of your favorite or least favorite guys. Talking about him, Michael Penix Jr. And then Bijan Robinson at running back. Over under is 7.5 for them.
First, I'd like to say Kyle Pitts is a bum. He is a. I'll never touch him in fantasy ever again. And the only time he ever can score a touchdown is if he plays against me. I get it. We got beef. Anyway, moving on. I think they eclipse the win total. I think they make the playoffs. And I think Bijan Robinson will come out of this season as the number one running back in the league.
I think Bijan is a Nate came out. He said, "I have the number 5 pick, and if he's there at 5, I think I may take him because that would kind of be a steal. I think he's going to be a great dual threat guy. Offensively, they got to score more points. They only scored 22.9 last year per game. They allowed 24.9 defensively. The defense is a work in progress. They obviously have Jesse Bates, who's very good, and then they got AJ Terrell at the one cornerback position. They're bringing in safety Xavier Watts in the 3rd round. First rounder James Pierce, a pass rusher from Tennessee, to bring in him, and then Jelon Walker coming over from Georgia. So I tend to agree with you that they should be in the mix to kind of have a turnaround season. Atlanta, 7.5. I think they do get that number. Next, we'll talk about the Carolina Panthers, and it's funny because everybody always says to me, "Oh, the Panthers, they were improving. Their last 5 games, they were 2-3. They had that lull. Everybody talked about, Bryce Young in terms of being benched, and Andy Dalton went in. But I did think they started to get better. But David Tepper, he's an impatient owner, and then you have Dan Morgan at the GM position. Dave Canales is the head coach. What do you think about the Carolina Panthers? They did draft Ted McMillan, somebody everybody should kind of keep their eye on coming out of fantasy. He's coming from Arizona. Their over under win total is 6.5.
It's going to be two teams right here. It's going to be, can Carolina sustain what they started at the back end of last season? They gave the Eagles fits last year as well. I mean, there's something there. The problem, as we talked about earlier in this show, is their defense. It's been a sieve. I mean, they literally, you could run up and down the field on them. They couldn't stop anybody. And I did see one prop bet thing because I tend to look at these things. Carolina to win the division was plus 600 because they're
Wow.
going to get that bat. They're going to get the schedule. They're going to get the teams that you should be able to beat. Do I think they're going to win the division? No, but do I like them to eclipse that win total? Yes.
Yeah, they only face 5 teams that make the playoffs. Their toughest games are probably, week 8, they host Buffalo. Week 9, they're at Green Bay. They have the Rams in week 13, and they have a late bye, week 14. And they don't play Tampa. It's crazy until week 16, and then they're at Tampa in week 18. So
That
they,
scheduling is so terrible. I mean, they did the same thing with Washington and Philadelphia. It's like I don't get why they do that with teams at the back end, but that's for another show.
yeah, it's crazy. And so 6.5. Carolina is one of those teams. I think they could. I think they'll just finish just under that number. So last year they were 5-12. Maybe they get to 6. I don't know if they get to 7 wins, but they will be improving. They will get better. Obviously, the defense. They allowed. They were one of the worst defenses in the league last year. They allowed 534 points, which is 31.4 points per game. Um, they have a ton of guys they're bringing in defensively. Bobby Brown coming over from the Rams. They have Treshaun Wharton coming over KC. Patrick Jones, the second, coming over at linebacker, coming over from Minnesota. So they're trying to help this defense out, but we'll see. Evero is the defensive coordinator. He may be on a hot seat. So interesting team, Carolina. I think they would be improved, but um, they'll still, they're not going to challenge for division. The last team, and the reason I held for last is I think they're probably going to be one of the worst teams in the National Football League. New Orleans Saints. They may be getting the bags out again, Kevin, like the old days. The owner is there is Gail Benson. Mickey Loomis has been general manager there forever. He may be on a hot seat. Kellen Moore coming over, new head coach coming over from the Eagles. Their over and over win total is 4.5. I just don't know if they have a quarterback. Tyler Shook is their quarterback. They brought in the draft in the second round, and then Spencer Rattler. So, do you think they'll get to that 4.5 win total?
Lloyd, you're a very very kind man. They are not one of the worst teams. They are the worst team in the NFL. There is no chance in hell they hit 4.5. They are a dumpster fire. There is no way they're gonna even the ownership's gonna let them try to win a game when Arch Manning could possibly go to New Orleans. That thing is like no, we can get Archie Manning's grandson playing in New Orleans. They're a terrible team. They don't even have to try to lose. They're just going to lose on their own. But they are awful.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting, Kevin, because in Week 17 they're at Tennessee, and whoever wins that game, they may win it, but they're gonna feel like a loser because they may miss out on Arch Manning. I tend to agree with you that they won't get to their win total of 4.5. I think they're gonna lose a lot of football games, and unless they can get a quarterback, that could in a trade like Cousins or something, I just don't see that happening. And then defensively, they allowed 23 points per game. Um, just not a lot to be excited about there. Maybe Chris Olave will come back from the concussion issue. So there is your NFC South preview. Another great week here on Lloyd Vance Insider Football on 102.9 The Game, Coast Sports Network. So glad everybody can join us. Great job, Kevin, as usual. Angel Martinez behind the glass, another great job producing the show. Next week, we'll talk more about some of these training camps opening, get into your fantasy football draft. Kevin and I will get you prepared. Now, I'm not going to say I'm getting you prepared to win, but
No.
we'll get you prepared to at least participate. So come join us next week. Thanks for joining. We'll talk to you later.